I've seen two really interesting social media posts, two reels, where Waves, the plugin company, was asking Chris Galland and Joe Chiccarelli, two phenomenal engineers, producers, a couple of questions. They asked them to rate certain things, how important those are to them in their process. And, you know, if you don't know who these people are, Chris Galland has done records for Lady Gaga, Post Malone, Rihanna, and many more. Joe Chiccarelli, legendary engineer producer as well, who's worked with the White Stripes, Weezer, Alanis Morissette, and more. And I saw these posts and I instantly saved them because I wanted to do the same test here on the podcast. And the reason is that, it's not a test, it's like just a questionnaire, but I wanted to do the same thing here on the podcast with Manel and then also give my opinion on these. The reason for this is that it's very interesting to me that many people follow the advice of YouTubers and content creators, and not always they follow the advice of actual engineers, actual professionals, actual like working producers who know what they're doing. And you'll find that oftentimes the opinions and the advice of the real, working engineers and producers making great records differs from lots of the popular opinions from content creators and YouTubers. And sometimes the two are the same. Some content creators make great records, of course, but it's not always the case. And so sometimes people, just make content because they want views, they want interaction and engagement, they want to promote products, whatever. It's not necessarily always the best advice that comes from real experience. And some people primarily make records, and so they give their honest advice on making records. And I get asked a lot of questions from people also in our coaching community and listeners of this podcast. I get questions a lot where somebody saw a post of someone and they asked me if they should do the same thing. And then when I look at it, and it's, in many cases, it's someone, who's not really making a lot of records. And then it's often advice that I wouldn't personally follow. And in some cases, it's people who know what they're doing and it's correct. So long story short, the question is, where do you get your information from? Are you following popular people online? And if so, do you check if they actually make stuff that you like, or do you follow people who make records that you enjoy, who have the experience, or maybe are the two the same? Just something I want to put out there. So we're doing this episode today. We're going to ask ourselves a couple of questions and compare it with the answers that two amazing industry professionals have given, and then give our thoughts on those. And then you have hopefully something to take away here and to think about. Those are very, very good questions, very valuable things. So I'm looking forward to this. My name is Benedikt Hein. I am a mixing engineer. I own a mixing studio called Outback Recordings. I've been full-time mixing records for a long time now, full-time producing for 16, 17 years, mixing full-time for 7 years at this point. So I transitioned to full-time mixing and only do a couple of productions now. But we mix at my studio, we mix more than 200 songs every year. So I'm very, very active. And Thomas, who's working at my studio as well. So we are one of those people who actually make records all the time. We also produce content, but we are actively working to keep our skills fresh. And this is just what we do. And we also run this coaching program called the Self-Recording Band, this podcast, but also the program that we have, the Self-Recording Syndicate, where we help self-recording bands and artists make better records themselves. And we pass along our learnings, lessons from our experience making records. As always, I'm not doing this alone here. I'm joined by my friend and co-host and also active music producer, Manel Espinosa Berenguer from Spain. Hello. How are you, my friend?
Hello, Benedikt. Just in case you guys don't know me, I'm Manel Espinosa, and I'm a music producer and mixing engineer from Spain, always ready to turn your demos into finished songs through a lovely process.
Yes. That's what you do. Yeah, so this is like one that I wanted to do in a long time. Now the timing felt right because I saw these posts, but it's something that has been bothering me a lot actually, where, there's nothing wrong with content creation. There's nothing wrong with running a YouTube channel if you do that for a living. And I get that the people need to promote products and need to run ads and need to do these things if that's your business. And a lot of these people, mean really well. They might be talented and all that. But if you're lacking the real world experience, sometimes the advice is not as relevant, for someone trying to get really great results. That's just the reality. And so I think that it's very, very, very important to pick your sources of information carefully and to learn from someone who does what you do, what you want to do every single day, ideally in a genre that's relevant to you, ideally in a DAW or a system that's relevant to you. And, the thing is, I don't know how you feel about this, Manel, or if you've seen this maybe also in other areas of your life. The thing is, people who are doing content for a living, they can do that very convincingly, and it's easy to believe them. You know, they're really good on camera, they have really good frameworks, they are good at teaching maybe, and so it seems like it's a good idea to follow their advice. And sometimes the people who are really good at the thing are not the best content creators. And so it's sometimes not as interesting, you know, it's not, people are not as likely to you know, follow those people's advice. One thing that comes to mind is one of the best people in this industry, you know, in terms of talent and the records he's made and all that, would be Eric Valentine, for example. And he has a great YouTube channel, he has great stuff, but he was never like a content creator first. And some of his stuff is like very long, pretty boring, not that engaging, like boring in terms of production value and fancy things. You know, he just talks making records and does it super, super well. But only a few people are willing to consume that information and follow it, although it is incredibly valuable, because they tend to follow people who make more exciting content. So I don't know if you've ever felt the same way about this. Like I've certainly in other areas of my life, you know, found it easy to believe exciting things that I saw until I figured out, wait a second, that might not be what I need, you know?
Yeah, I think those are like two very different skill sets to have. On one hand, like the production, mixing or whatever skill. And then there's the communication skill, right? And some people have both and some people have one of them really. So the problem is that sometimes it's difficult to know if the people who has the communication skills also has the other skill, right? And I think that a big problem that we have nowadays with how, you know, information in general works on the internet is that we have a lot of bits and small pieces of information, but we lack a lot of context. So what happens is that, for example, in our case with production or mixing content, we can find a lot of tricks and tips and stuff, but it doesn't always apply to our particular situation, right? Because like maybe our song is a different genre than the one that we're seeing. Maybe, you know, the instruments have been recorded differently. The artists are different, you know, and that happens with other things. For example, a couple of weeks ago that we talked about my back problems, for example, right? So I've been trying lots of exercises that I've seen on Reels, and yeah, sometimes something works, but it's not, I don't think it's useful in the long term, because every single person is different and the situation is different. So same thing happens for mixing, you know. I think you better go to someone who really knows or has experience on what you're doing, and someone who can also understand your context and give you advice taking your context into account. Yeah. And that's basically what you do, Benedict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. The context matters a lot. Your unique situation matters a lot. That's why I went we started with courses and then went fully like all in on coaching instead, because coaching, you know, you don't teach a generic cookie cutter thing. You teach it so that it's relevant to the individual person and their situation. There's a big difference there. And then also, what I find is that if you just think about it logically, if someone has the time to make a lot of really good content and, you know, do a lot of education and all of that, then it means that either they're not really booked up solid and don't spend a lot of time working on actual music, which is fine. Their job might be to be a content creator, right? But like, you won't see any like really busy, high level sort of engineer producer. You won't see many of those, you know, make content and create products all the time or courses, whatever. They might do that on the side or whatever, but not really. And if you see them, or if there's people like us who do both, obviously, then it's when they've built a team of people so that they can do all these things. I can only mix a lot of songs and then also run the self-recording band because of two things. First of all, I love to work a lot, which is not everyone. Like most people don't like working 60, 70, 80 hour weeks. And and I've done that for a long time because I just wanted to build this coaching thing and not just mix. So I had 2 full-time jobs for a long time, and then I started hiring a few people to help me with certain things. So the people who can do both, they usually have a bigger infrastructure in place, or they just hustle like crazy, and those are not many people, or they just and the other ones who make a lot of content and they don't have that kind of thing, they just make content primarily. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just the reality. And then there are, really good high-level sort of producers and engineers who will partner up with someone else. They might do videos for Mix with the Masters or Pure Mix or whatever, and that's totally fine, but they don't run the company and they don't do that. And they also certainly don't do one-on-one coaching, because if they did, if like a Grammy-winning, very, very successful multi-platinum engineer does one-on-one coaching, it would be, first of all, crazy expensive. It would have to be worth more to them than working on like some big record, in many, not just financially, but also in terms of impact and all of that. So there's another reason for that. And for me, I just like teaching so much, and I discovered that at some point, that I just wanted to do coaching. And in the beginning, when I started it, I said I'd do it even if it means that I would have to cut back a little on mixing, which didn't happen, but that was kind of my thing because I really wanted to do that. And I wanted to give to people all those things that that I've learned and all of that, because I come from that strong DIY ethos. It's the difference. I don't have any Grammys. I've never had a #1. I never did any like huge major label projects. I've did some, but like not like I'm not, you know what I mean? So for me, it was always like I work with cool, interesting, to me, like scene sort of bands and like DIY people doing their own stuff. That's what I've been doing all my life. And so I just kind of like to work with those people. So I also want to teach similar people to do the same thing. And I want to make sure they don't make the same mistakes that I did at the beginning. So if I was doing really big major label things all the time with lots of pressure, many people involved, crazy deadlines and all of that, I don't think I would be doing one-on-one coaching, right? But I can do the coaching because I still work a lot on records that people enjoy. I have a high output, but it's also in a spot where there's less pressure from a lot of people involved. There's less money involved, and I just like that DIY thing, which is not everyone. There's a few other people out there who do similar things, so we're not the only ones, but it's very rare. So that's kind of so if you think about it logically and you find someone online, it's either a content creator, it's someone who has built the infrastructure or hustled really hard to be able to do both, or it's someone who just does it for other people that they partnered with, but they're primarily making records and they're not running the company doing the content, So pick well, where you get your information from. And please go with people who have a lot of experience and teach you what really matters. So yeah, let's go to those questions, and then let's see why I wanted to do all of this and how this ties in to this topic. So Manel, I'm gonna say a couple of bullet points things here, and you just rate them from your perspective from 0 to 10. Like if that 0 means I don't care about that at all, doesn't matter to me, it's not important. 10 means yes, absolutely, this is important, or I do it all the time, whatever. And then I'll say my opinion too, and we'll see if and how often we agree with like Chris Galland and Joe Chiccarelli. Yeah, and then tell you why those results are there in the first place. Okay. Cool. Let's start. High pass everything or low cut everything. It's the same thing.
1.
Cool. I give this I would say a 1 or a 2. Yeah. So just to give you, I'm just going to say a little thing about the other results real quick, and we move on to the next one. We don't go into much detail. So Chris Galland gave it a 2, Joe Chiccarelli a 3. And, it's just something that there's no everything, It depends on what the song needs. Why would you low cut everything? If it needs a low cut, do it. But it's one of those things you see on the internet a lot where people say, low cut everything, always. Remove the rumble, clean it up. No, it depends on the song. Be intentional. So, yeah. Cool. Always mix with reference tracks.
7.
Okay. I'm giving this a 5, and this one is really, really interesting. So Chris Galland says 10. Yeah, I think in the reel he even says like 25 or something. Yeah. And Joe Chiccarelli says 1 or even 0.
Okay.
And I would say 5, and you say 7. And I think this makes total sense because reference tracks, if you can use them intentionally and analyze them and reverse engineer without copying, and then they can be super useful. And if you're early on in your journey, I think it's a great thing to reference a lot, to learn, build your taste and all of that. But then also it can be super dangerous because you don't want to chase reference tracks and you want to do what your song needs. And I think someone like Joe Chiccarelli, when he says 0, I think, he just doesn't need that because he has built his taste and his ear and all that, and he just wants to do whatever the song requires, and he doesn't want to get distracted by reference tracks. And I think Chris Galland would be able to do the same thing, but maybe he uses them in a way where it actually helps him. But if you would take away the reference tracks, he could damn sure make a great record still. So this one is like one where there is no definite answer, I think. And so if they are useful to you and you get better results, then use them. But use them so that you don't copy and just chase reference mixes, I would say. And if you find them to be distracting and confusing and your results get worse the more you reference, then maybe try not using them. I think for most people in the beginning, though, it is good to try it because you got to build your ear, your taste, all that first, and learn to reverse engineer what's going on in other productions. So my advice personally would be, if you're early on, yes, use reference tracks. If you are confident enough to get great results without it and reference tracks start to distract you, try doing it without it. What's your take on this, Manel? Why is this the 7 for you?
I'm thinking that if I was talking about production, I maybe would have said like a 9 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to me at this point to have references from the artist, from not only references in a broad way, but more in like in specific terms, like what do you exactly like of each of the references? Because that helps me connecting with the artist and with what he or she wants. And if I don't have that, it can be possible, but it's more difficult, I think. When it comes to mixing, I'd give it a 7 because I think I use references almost every time, but it's true that I don't reference constantly. It's more like at the end of the process, I kind of like to check how bright the overall mix is, if I should maybe change something in that regard, but it's not something that I do constantly during the mix, right? It's mostly at the end.
Yeah.
But it's important, I think, for me. So
I get it. Makes sense. Yeah. I also love that you made the distinction between production and mixing, different applications for references for sure. Yeah. Next one, mixing in mono.
0.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would have been a 0 for me a couple years ago. Now I would give it a 7. And Chris Galland gave it a 7. Joe Chiccarelli gave it a 10, which was kind of surprising to me. But here's my thought process on this. This would be like, I could totally see when someone says like that would be low on the priority list. To me, I never did it for a long time and it didn't really had any negative consequences. And stereo is more important than mono anyways. But I now would give it a 7 because I started doing it quite a bit, and not that mono is my target medium or whatever, but I switch to mono every once in a while because I want to make sure that I can hear everything in mono and it doesn't like disappear, not because of phase stuff, but like if I hit the mono button and then something is not audible anymore, there's a high likelihood that things crash, and if that things are clashing, not crashing, clashing. And so if I just stay in stereo, maybe something is really audible and clear to me because it's on the sides and, I can hear it because it's different left and right. But as soon as they're on top of each other, maybe I don't hear it anymore because there are frequency problems, things are clashing. And so I just want to make sure that it's not just because of the image that I'm hearing it. I want to make sure it's also because I carved out space. Again, I would totally be fine not doing it, and I don't do it on every mix, so I get the 0. And I know a lot of people actually who say 0 on this, who would say 0 on this as well, because they say mono just doesn't matter and people don't listen in mono. I just found it after a while, I found it a helpful tool for me to make sure that I don't I'm not masking anything, and maybe I can do a better job carving out things if I put it to mono and then it disappears. Sort of. That's kind of my idea. But yeah. So it means you never really do that.
I've never done that, but yeah, maybe I should try.
Yeah, but I've also listened to your mixes, and that was never really an issue. But it was the same thing for me. It was never an issue, but I tried, and it still improved mine a little bit, just because I thought like, oh, cool. On the sides, the two guitar parts are very clear. But if I put it to mono, so someone would listen on a Bluetooth speaker or just a phone or whatever, they kind of become one, and I don't really hear what the guitar players are playing anymore. And if that's the case, I might want to separate them a bit more, maybe. So that helped me a little bit extra. But yeah. But it's also one of those things, if you ever hear someone say, you always have to mix in mono, or someone say, you should never mix in mono, I would be skeptical. It's a personal sort of thing, And both of them, this was not a point where they both said like, yeah, absolutely, you must, whatever. It's like they just gave their opinion. They have a stronger opinion on some of the rest that we'll talk about. So the next one, quantizing live drums. Like hard quantizing,
I don't know.
That's keep it there. That's the answer. I don't know. They only asked this question to Joe Chiccarelli. They didn't ask Chris Galland. And Joe Chiccarelli said it could be a 0, it could be a 10. It depends on the song. And that's exactly what you were thinking as well when you say I don't know. Because like how would you know? And this again, if someone says you always have to quantize everything, that's bullshit. Like you wouldn't quantize a jazz performance or like a very organic rock thing that moves back and forth, but you would pretty often quantize a very mechanical, super tight metalcore thing that just needs to be spot on to the millisecond. It's like,
yeah.
Again, if someone says one or the other exclusively, it's either a genre thing or you should be skeptical. It's impossible to know without hearing the song.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the person who asks that question doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah. Shout out to Waves. Yeah.
I guess they did it just to create this sort of hot topic or whatever, right? But
sure.
It doesn't make sense to any producer or mixer, I think, my opinion.
Yep, I agree. Cool. So let's go to the next one. Sidechain compression.
I would probably give it like a 7 or something like that.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah, I use it quite often because I like to dial in like hard or crazy settings and then use that to like make it softer.
Yep. Okay. Oh, you mean? Oh, sorry, but that would be parallel compression.
Oh yes, that's what I mean. Oh, what did you say?
Sidechain compression.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Maybe 2.
Interesting. Great. So they didn't ask this Joe Chiccarelli, but they asked it Chris Galland, and he says 3. And my I would be on a 2 or 3 as well, somewhere there. It's one of those things where like everybody talks about it. It's one of the favorite topics of the content creators. And in real life scenarios, unless you're doing EDM where this is like part of the sound, when the bass and the kick drum ducking and all that, of course, then you would say a 10. But if it's just mixing or other genres, it's like, yeah, if a situation requires it, it's a way to solve a problem, but not high on the priorities list. And if you took it away from me, I could absolutely make records, and so is most people. So don't focus on that. It's when the time is right in a certain situation, it can come in handy and can be a solution, but yeah, not really worth talking about that much, contrary to what many people in the content world make you believe. So yeah. Checking your mix in the car.
I don't know. I would.
For you, right now. Do you do that often? If so, it's important. If you don't do it, it can be 0. I don't know.
I mean, I don't have a car, so.
Okay.
But I like how it sounds on my parents' car, so. But I don't feel like that is reliable. So I don't know, I would give it like a 3 or something.
Cool. Yeah. For me, right now it's a 0. It used to be a 5 or so. Now it's a 0. Maybe very early on it would have been a 10. I don't know, but it's a long time ago. And both of the answers of those people were 0. Both said 0. Again, the car check, everyone talks about it. It seems like you have to do it. Everyone says you got to check it in the car. You got to check it on 15 different systems and all those things. The reality is a much better advice is to learn one set of monitors or headphones. For most home studio people, it's going to be headphones, to learn that really well and learn to trust that and get good results there. And instead of spending lots of time listening in the car or somewhere else, I would spend more time listening to produced, finished music that you like on your actual monitoring system, so you learn what that sounds like, which then removes the need to go to the car. You only need to go to the car if you don't fully trust your main source of monitoring, so it's either inaccurate or you don't spend enough time there, so you don't really know what other things sound like. So if you're one of those people who only mix on your headphones or monitors, but you never listen to music there, change that. Because once you know your system really, really well, there's no need for a car check anymore, because the car won't tell you any more details than your actual system does. I said in the beginning I would have answered this differently because, I didn't have the confidence. I didn't know my setup really well. I didn't spend enough time listening there. And so I wanted to have different reference sources. So just to be sure I'm somewhere in the middle. Now what happens is if I do that, it scares me and confuses me more than it helps, because if I take it to the car and then I feel like, oh, it sounds boomy or whatever, I forget that this is because of the car and not because of my mix. But then it makes me insecure and I start questioning my mix. Or if I listen on many different, systems, then I try to arrive somewhere in the middle to make sure it sounds good everywhere. And this can often be a bad compromise, because you don't want to adjust for a flawed playback system. You want to make sure it sounds good on a good playback system, and then if there's flaws on something else, it's not your fault, and you can't make it right for everyone and everything anyway. So in the beginning, yes, if it gives you security, do it. If it gives you a sense of feeling safe and secure, but the more experienced you get, the less relevant it becomes. And when in doubt, I would spend more time listening to music on your monitoring instead of spending more time listening to your mixes somewhere else. And if you don't have a proper monitoring source, get a good pair of headphones.
I agree. Yeah.
Cool. Next one. EQing to the key and scale of the song.
I don't even know what that is, so I guess 0.
For you, it's a 0 then, right?
Yeah.
Yep. For me too. 0. Or I would say, no, I would give it a 1 or a 2. I'm going to say why. So they only asked this Chris Galland, and he said 0. He also said, I don't even know what that is, sort of. I'm sure he does, kind of, but also, same reaction that you had. So the idea of EQing to the key and the scale of the song is that, certain notes have certain frequency values, and A is 440 hertz, and 220 hertz and 110 hertz, and always half or double the frequency. And, every note has a certain frequency. And then some people say you should EQ to the key or the scale of the song. So if the song is in A, you might boost frequencies that belong to this key or something, and that concept is complete. No, I would say nobody, there's always the outlier or whatever. But I think most of our peers, most professionals would agree that this is not something they ever think about or do. It just doesn't make sense because there's so many overtones, different. It just doesn't matter at all. It's just a weird concept that's been around the internet for a while, and it's just not something you should do. I would say I give it a 1 or a 2 just because of one reason. I don't know how they meant this question, but if that also means, if there is a bass note that's a little louder than all of the other bass notes, I might go in there and turn down that frequency that belongs to this note so that this particular note is a little quieter in the low end. But you could also do that by just figuring out the note on analyzer, the frequency, turn it down without thinking about the key. But if that is what they mean with EQing to the key, then yes, I do that sometimes, depending on the key of the song. But but I don't really think about, this is an A and therefore I have to remove or boost these frequencies. That's not what I do.
But what if it changes key?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, holy shit. Yeah. No, it's one of those questions to ask here. Absolutely. So it's a 0 or a 1 or a 2, maybe, if it means addressing certain notes because of a problem, right? Yeah. But other than that, it's a 0 for me as well. Cool. Tuning drums to the key of the song.
Uh, 0. I never do that.
Yeah. They asked Joe Chiccarelli that only, I think, and not Chris Galland, and he says a 2. For me, it would be, a 0. I never really do it. I tried it, but if you asked Eric Valentine, who is, like I said, a very good trusted source, he would probably say a 10. He likes to do that. I know that. But there's not too many engineers who would do it. So this is one where you could find conflicting information, and I know that there are people who say they get great results from that. Figure it out on your own. But the fact that people can make amazing results without it, and then some make amazing results with it, maybe tells you that it's not that important. It's something to try. If you enjoy it, more power to you. But I don't think it's what makes or breaks records. And it seems like Joe Chiccarelli had the occasional thing where it made sense, so that's why he's giving it a 2. If it's electronic music, once again, it might make sense. If you have a note to a kick drum, like an 808 or something, that might make sense. If it's like very, sometimes, with toms, if they are really ringy and you can almost like play a melody on tom, sometimes that's the case, then it might make sense. It could be dissonant if you don't get it right, and it could feel better if it's right. You know what I mean? If you have really high-pitched sort of percussion stuff where you can hear the notes really well, it might make sense. But with normal rock drums or anything that's primarily just, percussive with not a lot of note to it, try it. If it makes you happy and if it sounds better, more power to you. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but also it's not something that most people need to make great records. And it's genre dependent, I would say. Okay, next one. Tune every vocal.
I would probably say something like 8.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I don't know how I would have answered this without seeing the results first. I got to be honest here. The other ones I was very clear. On this one, I was like, could be everything. For like if it says tune every vocal, I have to give it a 0 because it's just not true.
Yeah.
But if it's like tuning vocals and the importance of that, I would also give it a 7 or an 8 probably. But it's one of those things where if it needs tuning, then yes. But if it doesn't, then no. But like I would say a 7 or an 8 because most singers, even the really great ones, need a little help here and there, and it's almost always gets a little better if you adjust a few things. So that's why I would say 7 or 8, because if you do it tastefully and don't overdo it, almost every production benefits from it, as long as you keep it transparent. But if it says like every vocal or whatever, or if it's like quantizing the pitch or something, that would be a 0. It's like taste and style and intentionality. So Chris Galland gave it a 0. They didn't ask Joe Chiccarelli, but he gave it a 0. But he also added to this: if you quantize every vocal, you're gonna lose the life of it and all that. So I think the way I interpret this is like, if you think you have to do it and you do it the same way every time, of course, that's going to sound boring and monotonous. But I'm also very sure that his productions, if I look at the credits and it's like Lady Gaga, Post Malone, Rihanna and all that, there's damn sure tuning going on. So, so depends on how you ask this question, really.
Yeah, again, I think it's like tuning a vocal is too much, like too broad. Because it can be 5% or 100%, and I mean there are so many variables in there that's why I said an 8, because I almost tune every vocal every time, but it doesn't mean it's 100%. What I feel most of the times is that, for example, with backing vocals, even if I sing the backing vocals pretty well and in tune, mostly, when I tune them, like all the vocals, especially when you have like 3 layers of different notes, something clicks in my head. It feels better, like for some reason.
Yeah.
So I would normally be harder on backing vocals than the lead vocal.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, if it's an absolute, every vocal, it's got to be a no for me, because there's definitely things I don't want to touch because they feel and sound perfect. And then there's other things where like, yes, absolutely, you need to do that. So it's impossible to give a good answer there, I think. Yep. So the next one, mixing through your stereo bus or mix bus chain as soon as possible.
So that means starting with a mix bus.
As soon as possible, like bringing in a mix bus versus like putting it on at the end or in mastering, whatever. Just mixing through it as soon as possible.
I don't know. Let's say 9, just for giving it a little margin. But
yep, same here. That was my answer. 8 or 9 was my answer, because I would be able to do a good mix without it, but I prefer to mix into it in the beginning. And maybe there's the occasional situation where a mix bus compressor is not right at all and I decide to not use one and then only go to mastering. Could be. So that's why there's a margin. But in most cases, there's a mix bus compression or some sort of mix bus chain on from the beginning. The answers of those two were 10 for Chris Galland and 5 or 6 for Joe Chiccarelli, which I found surprising. 5 or 6, I didn't expect that, because I don't have an opinion. I haven't asked him. So I would love to hear why it's exactly in the middle. So does that mean like 50% of his mixes don't have a mix bus processing and 50% do, or like, I don't know. I just know that most engineers that I've asked, that I've talked to, most that I follow, like the ones who make records I really like, almost all of them mix through a mix bus compression or some sort of mix bus chain. That doesn't mean a full mastering chain, just something on the mix bus. And I was surprised to hear that Joe Chiccarelli says 5 or 6. So I don't know why he says that. It's just interesting to me. For me, it would be a 9, 8 or 9 maybe. Yeah. So then the next one, hard panning guitars left and right.
All these questions, that doesn't make sense. I don't know, 5.
Because it depends on the song?
It depends on the song, on the moment inside the given song. I mean, I don't think there's a rule to do that. So.
I gave it a 7 because I thought, if they mean whenever there is like rhythm guitars, 2 tracks of rhythm guitars, where do I put them? Do I pan them? Like if they mean, if you have 2 guitars, do you pan them all the way or you bring them in a little bit? Then my answer would be 10. I always do hard panned, and I shouldn't say always. Maybe my answer would be 9.5. But yeah, probably a 10. But if the question is guitars in general, what if I only have one and and the keys are stereo? Maybe my guitar stays in the center. What, like, does it account for different parts? Like you said, bring it in the verses, pan it out in the choruses, make it narrower, remove one. I don't know. There's too many variables, so that's why I would say a 7 or something. But in general, if I'm a hard pan left and right guy, yeah, and most people in rock are. So I would say my advice to you out there is like, if you're making any sort of rock or heavy music, which we primarily focus on here, or at least at my studio, then hard pan is a good option in most cases, unless there's only one or there's movement in the mix. But if you're wondering in general, it doesn't, to me and to most of my peers, it doesn't make sense to have guitars at 70% all the time or something. Like, the default for me is wide, but I might intentionally narrow it in a part and then bring it out again. But if my widest sort of is always 100%, I don't just say I'm doing it 70 for whatever reason. That just, why would I do that? And so Chris Galland's answer was 8, and they didn't ask Joe Chiccarelli. So yeah, I think most people hard pan guitars, but also most people automate that, and it depends on the part. Only using one reverb for the whole mix.
0.
Yeah, 0 for me as well. 0 as well for Chris Galland. It's like, why? He just said, I think something like, why would I do that? Like, yeah. Maybe if it's just an acoustic guitar performance and nothing else, and then you'd have one space or something. But in most mixes, there's more than that, and why would I limit myself to just one? Yeah, so 0 for me as well. But I know where this comes from. I've seen people give this advice of like, you want to glue everything together, so you send everything through the same reverb, and like, yeah, but no, So no. Okay. If the mix sounds good on AirPods, it sounds good everywhere.
I don't know. I don't have AirPods, so 0.
Yeah. For me, it's a 0. For Chris Galland, it was 0, and for Joe Chiccarelli, it was 1 or 2. So maybe he says like, yeah, AirPods matter because so many people have them, but like still 1 or 2, not important at all. And definitely not. It sounds good everywhere. So no, 0 as well. Popular belief though, a lot of people say earbuds is all you need because everybody listens on earbuds. So why would you need monitoring? Yeah, to make it sound good on different types of earbuds and also on AirPods, you might have to hear everything properly and not just mix on AirPods, because the stuff you can't hear on AirPods can still be problematic when you then listen to the final thing on AirPods. And so, yeah, and there are outlier engineers who say they do a lot of their work primarily on those. Most of them will still have a good monitoring system to reference. And maybe someone does it only on AirPods, but I would never assume that I'm that kind of unicorn. So don't do that. And also the statement itself that it sounds good everywhere when it sounds good on AirPods, that's just false. It's just false. Yeah. Something can sound really good on AirPods and very shitty in a club or on a nice stereo hi-fi or on a good pair of headphones or in a car or wherever. Like, that's the other thing, right? You might be able to make it sound good on AirPods, but there's other things as well. So,
and yeah. There's other things that come into play. Like, do you enjoy mixing on AirPods? I mean, if you do, it's fine. And how much are AirPods? Is it worth it having AirPods?
Yeah, I mean, it's not crazy expensive compared to other good stuff out there. But like, yeah, is it worth? For the same money, you could get a really, really good pair of headphones. So yeah. Okay. Stereo imaging plugins. I found that to be super, super difficult to answer. So just stereo imaging plugins.
Oh, I use them pretty often, but I would give them a 5 because I don't think it's like very important, but I use them.
Yeah. For me, it was also a 5 because it's one of these it depends situations. Sometimes I need them, but I could also do without. So yeah, somewhere in the middle. They didn't ask Joe Chiccarelli this. They asked Chris Galland, and he said 10, which I found it surprising. But then if you think about the references, it makes sense because a lot of the pop stuff, if you look, Lady Gaga, Post Malone, Rihanna, and other pop stuff, there's a lot of like what we call big mono sometimes, where you don't have, like in rock, you have a guitar here and a guitar there and one thing over there, one thing over there. In pop, you have many things that are just stereo in general. Every synth is stereo, every drum loop is stereo, everything's stereo. And it's not off, like many of these productions will just have everything on both sides. And the only way to create width there is through intentional widening or manipulating the width of these things, because you rarely want to collapse a stereo thing to mono and put it on one side. It all stays stereo all the time. And so then you need these tools to kind of, like, how wide is this compared to this? And, so I get it in this case that you get the width from stereo plugins and from widening and all that. So it makes sense. And maybe he means a different thing also with imaging. I'm just interpreting what he says. For me in rock, it's not that important because the width comes through panning and doubling things, but occasionally I need it. So yeah, it's a 5, and highly genre dependent, I would say. Always mix. This one's super interesting to me when I heard this. Always mix at low volumes.
I would give it 7 or 8.
Good. I would have given it a. What did I give it? I wrote it down. I gave it a 9. Okay, yeah. Chris Galland says 0, and Joe Chiccarelli says 10.
Oh.
But I think, I can only assume, but I think it highly depends on how you hear this question, how you interpret the question. Because if you'd asked, I'm pretty sure, if you had asked, spend a lot of time at low volumes or listen a lot, primarily at low volumes or whatever, I think Chris Galland would have given it much higher rating. But if you say always mix at low volumes, If someone cranks it up every once in a while, it would be a 0 because no, there's no always. So that's kind of, I decided to give it a 9 because I primarily mix at low volumes, but every once in a while I crank it so I can feel the low end and just get a different perspective. And I'm sure Joe Chiccarelli, on the contrary, he says a 10, but I'm sure he every once in a while also listens loud to feel certain things. I would be surprised if not. So I think it highly depends on how you interpret the question. But I think most people, again, would agree that the bulk of your work should be at low volumes, if only to protect your hearing. You can't just always listen at high volumes because then you won't be in business for long, Yeah, and Chris Galland also added that she said, sometimes you just got to turn up the volume and listen loud, which I agree with. For him, it meant 0. For me, this means 9 because most of the time quiet. Sometimes I crank it. I don't know. I can only interpret. I hope he does not always listen at super high volumes. So, Manel, for you, this means most of the time low and sometimes turning it up?
Yeah, basically, just as you said.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those things you hear people say a lot, and not many people follow this advice, and especially the consistent volume thing, and like monitoring volume really matters. So yeah, make sure you listen at low volumes a lot. Color coding every track before you start a mix.
I would give it a 0 because I don't think that's crucial or anything, but I do it. Like
but if it's not crucial, why do you do it? You got to think it from your perspective. Like, does it matter? Is it important to you or not?
It's better to navigate the project. It gives me a better feeling because it looks less boring with different colors. But I don't think that is something that's
okay.
I don't think it's a game changer or anything.
Okay, then it's a 0.
It works for me. Like, I do it every time. I have my template full of colors, but I don't think it's crucial.
That's interesting that you do it every time, but you also give it a 0. Interesting. Yeah, for me, this is a 9 probably. Like, I could somehow, if I really had to, get a great result without it. But like, honestly, I can't really mix the way I mix without it. Like, I want to see immediately what things are. If I have to think, or if I have to stop and read what the track says and not just know that these are drums and this is vocals, that would be a horrible mixing experience for me. So definitely very important, because I would not be able to get in the flow because I would have to stop and read things all the time in order to navigate my session. So no, that's definitely a 9 for me, at least. Chris Galland says it's an 8, and they didn't ask Joe Chiccarelli. So,
I would say 2 comments. One, maybe I should try to mix one song with only one color and see how it feels.
Yeah.
And second, I think in this case, it should be color coded before, not you coloring it every time, just to make sure, like.
Having a template that does it for you, basically, and not doing it every
it's
time.
It's done already, because like coloring it every time, I think that would be a pain.
Yeah, totally. And it just says before you start a mix, and in my case as well, it's done. I don't do it every time when I start a mix. Yeah, it's in my template and all that. So, yeah. I have never, honestly, all the professional sessions I've ever looked at, the productions I've been a part of, the productions I've done, I've never seen. I really think this is a hard never for me. I think I've never seen an actual pro working in an unlabeled, messy kind of session. Everyone had some had a bit more simple, others more detailed, whatever, but everyone had their session set up in a way that it's easy to navigate. Like, I've never witnessed a really messy, chaotic session. I'm sure there's someone out there, but I've never seen it, honestly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you do it as well, so.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. How important is gain staging?
10.
Yep. That's one of my favorite ones from this set of questions. It's a 10 for me. Chris Galland says 10, 25, I think, even something like that. He says, like, it's everything, he says. He literally said it's everything. Joe Chiccarelli says 8 or 9, super important. And yes, I agree. It's absolutely a 10 for me as well. And here's the thing. This is one of the things where you find so many content creators out there and people who say, gain staging doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter anymore because we're all digital, and there's 32 bits float, and you can't get clipping anyways, and it doesn't matter if the red lights come on, and who cares? And people want to make you do the gain staging, and they just don't realize that you can, completely skip this. It's just tedious. And I've seen all these things. I've seen it every time someone posts about this. Someone comes immediately in the comments and be like, we don't need this anymore. Don't listen to this guy. Gain staging is useless and all this stuff. When we ran ads to a free guide that we gave out that was primarily about mix prep, gain staging, and doing a rough mix, I got so many comments on like, who the hell needs gain staging? It's like, so here's the thing. Every single professional that I've ever talked to says it's super important. It's everything, because the gain structure from one plugin to the next, having healthy levels in general, is just non-negotiable, because the only exception to that would be if you had a session with purely digital or stock plugins, not emulating anything analog, where it's really just stock EQ or something like a fab filter or whatever, and nowhere is any analog emulation, nowhere is any no compression, there's nothing that's depending on the input signal, no saturation. If it's just EQ and volumes, then yes, ignore it, because if the red lights come on, well, it's 32-bit. Internally, there's no clipping in a DAW, it doesn't matter. But even then, the output needs to be right, because you can't clip that for the final thing. But yeah, okay, gain staging in the session doesn't matter. As soon as you have anything that emulates analog, anything that saturates or sounds different if you send more or less level into it, as soon as you have compressors active, it matters, because if you change the gain on something going into something else in your chains, in your routing, your whatever, as soon as you do that, everything changes. If you have a mix bus compressor on, which most people do from the beginning, and you change the gain somewhere, gain is just another word for volume, by the way, then the entire mix is different, because the compressor is reacting different to what's coming in. And if you have something that simulates analog, gain staging matters, because more or less gain means you get a higher or lower noise floor, you get a different reaction to the incoming signal, more or less distortion, and all kinds of things. So what gain staging really means, people make it this really complex thing, and I get that it sounds overwhelming often, but what it really means is having an eye on your levels and just being intentional with how much level you send from A to B. It could be from one plugin to the next, it could be from one channel to the next, it could be what you send in parallel. All of those things is just being intentional with all your levels everywhere. It starts with the gain knob on your interface, and then it continues with the clip gain or the gain knob at the top of your DAW channel, and it continues with the output or makeup gain knobs on your plugins, and then with the faders going into the next thing. All those checkpoints is where you should check your levels and make sure that you do it intentionally, and that you're aware that if you change something, everything down the line later in the chain will change as well. So yes, gain staging matters, and it's everything. If you talk to mastering engineers, they will go on all day about how the gain structure between their different gear matters, and they would swap the order of the gear without changing settings just because of the gain structure, like all those things. It matters. So yes, don't believe anyone who says we don't need this anymore. We do need it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the few questions that made sense.
I love it. And still, it is one of the ones that made sense. And still, it is the one where you would get most online disagreement and arguments about, although this is the one that's really clear to most professionals, because pros never skip the basics. They never don't do the basics. And also, most pros learned it properly, at least like the really good ones. And if you learn audio properly, you learn about levels. It's part of audio. So yeah. And properly, I don't mean you have to go to audio school. I just mean learning from someone who knows what they're doing. So cool. Next one. Volume automation on vocals.
I don't know, 6 or 7 or something.
Really?
I mean, sometimes, yes. I do it often, for example, with like breaths. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they can be too loud, but you want them, but not so loud. So sometimes it's easier to do it with volume automation rather than adjusting the compression, because maybe you like the compression when the singer is actually singing. So,
but you have a static volume for the vocals other than that throughout the entire song most of the time?
It depends. Normally, I would say most of the time, probably.
Really? That's interesting.
Probably, but yeah, it's kind of difficult. Not really, because sometimes I have one track for the verses and one track for the choruses. So yeah, that's different. So
Okay.
yeah, probably it's different normally.
Okay, and do you do any kind of clip gain automation, or it's not automation, but like adjusting certain parts that make it louder or quieter in the beginning of the mix or something? Or is it really just one volume throughout?
Generally, it's one volume.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So for me, this is like this would be my 25 if I could. And for them, it was Chris Galland says 10 and Joe Chiccarelli says 10 or 11. But also because you said you have different tracks for different parts, I don't know if you really maybe do it differently. But you know, it's like it's one of the things where I think Joe Chiccarelli says also it's everything here, because for me, I there's no way I could imagine a static lead vocal or vocal volume in general throughout the mix. There's always going to be a word that needs a little push up, or there's always going to be a part that where the vocal just rises, needs to be a little louder, and then I have to bring it down, and it's like it just has to move. So if you look at my fader for my vocal in a mix, it just moves all the time. So yeah, for me, vocal volume automation in general, but especially on vocals, it's definitely a 10 for me. But from what you're saying, Manel, and from hearing your mixes, I don't believe that your vocals are the same volume, because you have lots of dynamics in your songs too, and I'm not sure if in a quiet verse the vocal would be just as loud as in the loud chorus. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you achieve it through different methods. That's why I'm asking. It's very interesting to hear that. I don't hear that. I don't perceive your mixes as static. So
I'm thinking that like when I'm recording vocals, like I'm singing, I do a lot of
okay.
these things. So maybe I'm doing it while I'm recording, right? Because I don't want to like bring the gain like so.
Okay.
In some ways, when it's about my songs, I do that when I'm recording my vocals, because I tend to get away from the microphone when it's a very intense part and stuff like that. So yeah. And when it's not my songs, there are, many times I have different tracks for different parts of the song. So maybe I'm doing it in a different way. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. What I sometimes do is that if I feel like in the chorus the vocal is a bit lost, I'll bring it up. But that normally happens more towards the end of the process than at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That counts. Starting every mix with the kick drum.
Whoa, let me think. I mean, I would say I start balancing every time with the kick drum, but I don't know if that means every mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally I do, the gain staging first. And when it comes to the balance, it's first the kick, and then I add sometimes the snare and the vocals and the bass. So yeah, it starts with a kick. So I guess it should be like an 8 or something like that.
Yeah, mine was an 8 too. Chris Galland says it's a 7, and Joe Chiccarelli, I don't think they asked them. Or one of them, I don't know who they asked actually. That's wrong in my notes here. Like one of them said 7, the other one wasn't asked. For me, it's an 8 too. You said also an 8, and for exactly that reason. It's not that I always process it first, but I bring it in first when I do the first initial balance for a simple reason. In most mixes in modern music, it has the most energy, and if I start with that and then bring in everything, like I have my if I start with something else, I don't know how allowed to turn it up really, because I want to keep some headroom. If I bring up the kick first and I leave a certain amount of headroom, I can bring up everything else and it won't overdrive my mix bus. And I do kick, just like you said, kick, snare, bass, vocals first, because in terms of volume balances, because those together will be the heartbeat, the pulse, the groove of the song. They will have the most level. And then afterwards, if I bring in any guitar, synth, whatever, it won't raise the level a lot anymore overall. So those high volume, high impact things come first for me in terms of balance and levels. And so that's why. But it's also not like a 10, because I could probably do it with starting with the vocal or something and it would also work. So, but yeah, an 8 is for me. And he says 7, so.
Yeah, normally when I start with that, I have the view meter open, and this is not, it doesn't have to be like that every time, but normally it's like only the kick, it's like -5, kick plus bass, it's like -3 or something like that, and then with vocals, it's around 0.
Yeah.
That's what
Perfect.
I think normally.
Gain staging. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. And the final one. Now we get to one that you already answered. Parallel compression.
Oh, and what did I answer?
I don't remember.
Oh, wait. So I'm going to answer again and see if I say the same thing. Because you have it there written, right?
Yep. I don't have it there.
Oh, well, but the recording
yes
knows. So yeah, I would say like 7 or 8, something like that.
Okay, so you do it quite a bit?
Yes, I do it mostly on the basses. It can be like the mix bass or the drum bass, or because I tend to dial in crazier settings and then dialing back with a parallel knob on the plugins.
Yeah. For me, it's a 5 because I like to do it quite a lot, but also not at all on every track. And if I had to go without it, I would totally be able to mix without it. It's a cool thing when it works, and I like to do it, but it's not a must. So that's why I'm in the middle, kind of. And Chris Galland says 1, he rarely ever does it, which I found interesting. And this one is one, again, content creators love this. And it's one of those fancy things where they make you do, they say like, you always need to do this and it's better than normal compression and whatnot. No, it's one of those things that if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And some people swear by it, others don't. There's no definite answer here. And you'll find people who don't use it at all and make great records. And you'll find people like Andrew Sheps who only do it all the time, apparently, and get great results. But none of these will tell you should never do it or you should always do it. They will tell you that it works for them or doesn't work for them, and you need to find out yourself. So whenever you hear someone say, this is how you have to do it, and it's way better than normal compression, run. And if you hear someone say that you should never do it, run as well. It's one of those things, right? So, yeah. Okay, so to sum it up, very interesting. We have stuff like high pass everything. Nope, for all of us. There's no everything. It depends. Always mix with reference tracks. Depends on how you read the question. It could be a 10, it could be a 0, depending on where you are in your career and how you use the reference tracks.
Yeah.
Mixing in mono was a similar thing. High up the list for 3 of us. Manel doesn't do it, but also gets great results. I don't know. And also it's something that changes maybe over time in your career. Maybe you go back and forth. Yeah. Quantizing live drums, not answerable. It depends. So everyone who has a strong opinion on this, know that it's context dependent. So don't fight over this online. It's a waste of energy. Mm-hmm. Sidechain compression, if your genre needs it, yes. But in general, no. Low on the list. As much as content creators love it. Most people making real records don't worry about this too much. If it's not necessary for the genre. Checking your mix in the car, nope, for all of us. I get why people do it. I did it as well, but if you ask most people, it's not really the best idea. There's other things that you can do to improve your monitoring. EQing to the key and scale of the song, nope. Tuning drums to the key of the song, nope, for most people. There's the occasional situation or the occasional person who says otherwise. Try it. If it works, more power to you. Definitely not essential. Tune every vocal. Yes, if you mean that there's some sort of tuning going on in most productions. No, if it means hard tune everybody regardless of the song. It's taste and intentional, Again, another waste of energy fighting over this. Mixing through a mix bus chain early on. Yes, for most people, I'd say. And the same was here. That's the case here too. Hard panning guitars left and right. Yes, but also not static throughout the song most of the time, I'd say. But when in doubt, in terms of just how wide you go, yeah, most people would pan them hard left and right. Only using one reverb for the whole mix. 0, wherever that came from. If the mix sounds good on AirPods, it sounds good everywhere. Nope, no, it's just false statement. Stereo imaging plugins. Depends on the genre, I'd say, and what you do. So hard to answer. It was between, it was 10 for Chris Galland. It was like 5 for me. And what was it for you? I didn't write that down.
I don't know.
Somewhere in the middle as well, right?
Yeah.
Always mix at low volumes. If it's always 0, if it's most of the time, it's almost a 10. So, yeah. Color coding everything before you start a mix. We all do it. Also, Manel does it, even though he says 0. So I would say yes. Yeah, I think yes, absolutely yes. Gate staging, 100% yes. Volume automation, yes. I found it interesting what Manel said. I think you do the same thing though, because what matters is what comes out of the speaker. So as long as your vocals are sitting right in every part and there's enough movement, you're doing it right. Most people achieve it through volume automation. Starting every mix with the kick drum, yes. If it means levels and gain staging, no. If it means processing, but yeah, in general, we start the mix with the kick drum for good reasons, technical reasons more than anything. Parallel compression, figure it out. You'll find people with the 0 here and people with a 10 here, and both make great records. So what I'm saying is, this is pretty much what I expected. What this means is there are some like non-negotiable audio basics that are, for whatever reason, not really popular out there, and people like to just skip them or don't do them. And then there are other things that are fancy and you can make great content around them, and they look like the magic solution, but nobody really does, ever does it. So like sidechain stuff and whatever, it's there for a reason, and it's cool if it works, like absolutely, but it's not the primary thing you should focus on. And then there are things that you simply can't answer because context matters more than anything. And, stuff that's very polarizing and content friendly because people will fight over it for hours, but it's just a waste of energy to do that. Like the whole editing and tuning topic, it's like context matters so much. It's completely useless, complete waste of your time. If you spend time arguing about that, or if you have a strong opinion where it's only black and white, it absolutely depends. So focus on the basics. Ask, when in doubt, look up what true professionals do and say about these things. It's a good way to start. Ask and look at a couple of them for those topics where the opinions go like, where there's different opinions, and then it might just mean you have to try it and see if it works for you. But definitely go to those people first. Go to a couple of them, see what they say about it. Stay away from the hype, fancy topics. It's interesting, but if you see something like that, double check if that's really advice with like common knowledge and like really great people do it as well, or if it's just something that's good for content. And yeah, and the non-negotiables, do them. Don't skip them. There's no way around healthy levels. There's no way around finding the right levels for each part, whether you do that with automation or not. There's no way around, protecting your hearing and establishing a consistent, preferably low listening volume. Stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of my takeaway here. And so finally, if you are looking for, resources online, maybe give the more boring stuff a chance if the person doing it has credibility and has worked on thousands of songs or hundreds of songs or hundreds of artists, has made records you like. Maybe try and sit through something that is not super high-paced with lots of fancy edits and all that, and give it a chance, because the value in the content might be greater than in some other stuff that looks highly valuable, but is actually just a bunch of fluff or not really based on real experience. And some people do both well, but it's hard to know sometimes. So yeah, I'm just saying, give the people making real records a chance, even if they might not be the greatest content creators. And of course, like we always say here, Manel and I work on actual projects all the time. Thomas as well, who's working with me at the studio. We've been mixing and working on, like really thousands of songs at this point. Somewhere behind me, there's a plaque that says like 40 million something, 41 million streams, all coming from like small DIY artists, so it's not that there's a lot of bunch of like Grammy winning stuff there, but it's because I've worked on so many things with so many bands, so many artists, and I really know a thing or two about making records. And so does Manel, and so does Thomas and our team. And so that's why we offer coaching, and we can do that while feeling really good about it, because we have the confidence to say that what we do works, because we also see the results for our students as well. And so if you want advice from someone who's actually making records, go to the selfrecordingband.com/coaching and apply for coaching there. We won't teach you what's like trendy or fancy or what's like hype stuff. We show you what matters and works for your music, your specific situation. Context matters, and it's rarely black or white. Our students say that it depends is one of my favorite answers to their questions, because it's true. And if you want to experience what it's like to work with someone who can make great records and go through that whole process, you can of course hire us as well to mix a song, or go to Manel and let him produce one of your songs or mix one of your songs, if you want to have that experience. And with that, we're trying to up our content game a little bit as well, because we just know how important it is to, broaden our audience and all that, and because also it's fun and we like to get better at things. But when in doubt, our focus will always remain on the value that we provide, the truth in what we provide, and how confidently we can teach those things. And if it means that some people leave our videos because they think it's too long or boring or whatever, then so be it. I hope that the ones who stick with us through these videos and through these podcast episodes get the value from it. And so this is what we do. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you, Manel, for answering all these questions. I know I'm not making it easy for you sometimes, man, because I like put you on the spot, and it could be like, what if you completely failed at this or whatever, right? Which is not the case, but like, no, you did a great job, and thank you for doing this. Thank you for your opinion. There's different interesting perspectives in there every time I do this. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you.